Start a Therapy Practice podcast, episode number 85.
Scott Harmon, startatherapypractice.com podcast.
Well, hello there. How in the world are you doing? Thank you for joining me on this podcast. So glad you're here today. My name is Scott Harmon, and this is the Start a Therapy Practice podcast. Be sure to go by startatherapypractice.com and get my free stuff, because there's free stuff over there. But today, we have the special privilege of talking to Paul Potter, physical therapist, and we're going to go over his guide. This is a free guide, so you can pick this up at startatherapypractice.com/85, or you can go straight to Paul's site, paulpotterpt.com, click on free stuff and get this guide. So what is the guide? The guide is how to talk about what you do as a therapist to gain trust and to gain referrals. So it's a very handy guide. It's very practical. And I made a funny comment that towards the end of the guide, there's kind of like a Mad Libs script that Paul provides to help you unpack and then repack to say what you do in therapy. So it gives you a very practical tool right there. He calls it a 5-part dialogue formula, and it kind of looks like Mad Libs. And I think Paul kind of got a chuckle out of that, but it's very practical. So go over to paulpotterpt.com, click on free stuff, and download this guide, how to talk about what you do to gain trust and referrals. And also, I made a comment towards the end of our conversation, I'm serious about it, that when you create this Mad Libs script, this formula to talk about what you do, to take out your phone and read that script off after you've created it. And that way, there's 2 reasons there. One is so you can see yourself give that script and see what you need to improve on. And then also to share that. If you're willing to share that with Paul or myself, you can email Paul. It's heypaul@paulpotterpt.com, or you can email it to me, Scott@startatherapypractice.com. If you're like, well, I don't want to share a video with these knuckleheads, then share the script of it. Email it to us, just the words, and we'll give you some constructive criticism. We're not going to bash you or judge you on it, but we will try to help you out and make that better. I think that would be helpful. Now, part of Paul's guide over here is to figure out who your potential clients are, to kind of unpack that, paint a picture of who those potential clients are. I do have a couple podcasts back. Number 83 is how to create a client persona. So if you go to startatherapypractice.com/83, you can listen to that. And there's also a guide on creating a client persona. Now, in my guide, I don't unpack or explain how to have conversations with those clients. It's more of just identifying who your potential clients are. So you need both of those guides. You need this guide that Paul is providing, and you need my guide of how to create a client persona. I mean, that's like 2 sticks of dynamite right there. You need to get both of those. So startatherapypractice.com/83 and paulpotterpt.com, and click on free stuff. All right. With that, let's get to the conversation with Paul Potter. Here we go. Hey, Paul, how are you doing today?
I am wonderful, Scott. It's great to see you, and thanks for the chance to be on your show.
You're more than welcome. We need to do this more often. So you and we've been conversating here before the show, and we covered so much that it's just great to catch up on with each other. Now, we did not make a pact for this, but I think it's safe to say that you and I are not going to talk college football.
I think I saw the bottom 10, the rankings that they have those, and I think both Nebraska and Arkansas were in that. Yeah. I think Nebraska was no-Braska. We were number 1 of the bottom 10, and I think Arkansas was number 5.
Oh, it's bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
We'll call it a rebuilding year, right?
Yeah.
And we'll just not talk about it. No, today we're gonna talk about basically how to have a conversation about what you do And I just want to mention that you have this nice little handout download cheat sheet on how to talk about what you do in order to have conversations, get more clients, and just let people know about you and what you can do. So I will put a link in the podcast post on this. And can they go to your website and get it also?
Yeah, the best place to catch it is, it's called Free Stuff. So it's kind of about a third of the way down the homepage, you'll say, check out my free stuff. Just click on that and that'll take them to, I've tried to put together a few how-to guides. And then one of them is how to talk about what you do to gain trust and referrals. So just click on that and they'll be able to download that.
Excellent. At
For free, of
paulpotterpt.com.
course. Yeah, paulpotterpt.com.
Excellent. Free stuff. I like free stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about this. And this is a very practical guide. So I want people to not think, oh, I've got to write this down. I got to write this down. No, just go get it. paulpotterpt.com, or go over to the podcast website post and you can get the link there. So, and you definitely want to get it, because like I said, it's very practical. I mean, there's stuff like right there to fill out. You're writing on it. I like that, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I were talking before, and I had mentioned that last week I shot a little short video, just kind of a talking head video off the cuff of how to talk about what you do. And so you and I were thinking about the same subject kind of at the same time, which is really kind of weird, but kind of cool also. And I was like, I came up with some of the same ideas. Of course, you put this in a lot better detail and in a better format than I did. I was just shooting it off the cuff, but you've put some thought into this. So at the beginning, you have here, how do people get to know each other? You kind of cover some ideas of how we get to know each other. And I think in this world of social media, we somewhat get out of practice of just having a basic conversation. And like I tell my kids, our brain gets really good at what it does a lot of. It's over on social media a lot, or if we're just watching Netflix a lot, we kind of lose that power of having just a basic conversation. And so you go over that a little bit, but I'm interested to get your ideas, because you do mention social media on there. What are your ideas on that? The social media, but then transferring that into a real life conversation.
Well, I probably have a bias or a bent towards, I'd probably put it in relational marketing, and the face-to-face encounter. And I think if you want to build a practice that has two really outcomes, that has maximal impact in people's lives and is personally fulfilling, it's built upon good, solid relationships with the clients that you get to serve. And when I think of long-term sustainable growth in a business, solid long-term relationships that are excited and committed to referring people, what we would call word-of-mouth referrals. Once you start to build enough of a base of those type of relationships, and you expand that base kind of month by month, year by year, in the long run, you get almost like a practice flywheel going, where you've invested so much energy to kind of get it going, and then eventually that flywheel starts to generate energy on its own. And in our lingo, it'd be like it starts to generate word of mouth referrals, and you have multiplied your relationships via these other relationships, and you don't have to spend your time trying to get people in the front door and spending your energy. So if we can kind of just step back and say, well, gee, what kind of practice do I like? Why do I like being a therapist? Well, I really enjoy people and connecting with them and helping them in a meaningful way. Those are the type of the relationships you try to cultivate, and you're promoting your practice should naturally flow out of those same relationships. So then we start saying, okay, how do I start building those relationships right from the get-go? How do I do that from my first conversation? And I think the best way to do that, is the hardest to a certain extent, is establishing those one-on-one, face-to-face, natural conversations where it's two-way. You get to know them, they get to know you, and it's not a forced persona that you try to take on. Says, okay, now I'm selling, now I'm supposed to market, now I'm supposed to really be on Shark Tank and be something I'm not. It says, well, even if you have to put that persona on, that's not really who you are and what you want people to share who you really are. So that's kind of the genesis of it a little bit, thinking long term, and then the process to get there, and then how do you break that down right at the beginning?
When you mentioned you mentioned Shark Tank, I love watching Shark Tank. But what people will do is, when, just like you said, if you come across condescending and patronizing to people because you went into selling mode, they're going to say, "Hey, I'm out." Just like Shark Tank, I'm out. They're not about selling. They want the, they're trying to look for the relationship. And you mentioned in your download here about having that conversation, potential conversations, like in a grocery store, when you see somebody who either you have, provided a service for, provided therapy before, or even if they just ask you about therapy. I had this conversation the other day. We have in our little small hometown, we have a Steak and Shake, brand new Steak and Shake. And I was like, well, I'll go check out the Steak and Shake, So went in there, had my shirt on with my clinic logo on there. It says therapy for kids. And the lady behind the counter says, just asked me about it. Oh, therapy for kids. And I said, yeah, we provide speech and OT and PT. And she said, well, my child receives therapy at this other place, which is not really our competition because they're pretty far down the road. But I know a couple therapists down there. So I dropped their names and they're like, oh, you know them. The therapy world's a pretty small world. And so we sort of had a connection there. It was a very quick connection because, she had to work. I had to get out of the line. But just to have those real life conversations in the context of whatever, a grocery store or a fast food place. And what came to my mind is that a lot of times we're too much in a hurry. That's just our world that we live in. That, oh, I got to get out of here. I can't even look at that person, because it might be a conversation that we have to have. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Just I think there's a couple aspects of that. Being prepared, doing your due diligence so that you're ready to make a good-hearted effort to explain what you do for that person's benefit, for them. Because I hear we have these conversations where I feel the frustration and somewhat of the angst in therapists' voices, that people really don't know what I do and they don't really know how much they need what I have to offer. I can really help them, but they just don't understand it and they don't get it. Well, there is a gap. There is a kind of an awareness gap and a knowledge gap that, as therapists, really the general public really doesn't know what we do. And occupational therapy and speech therapists, there's a huge identity problem. Like, what do you guys do? I don't. Well, so there's that. So it is really on us to bridge that gap coming from a good place, a giving place, where we're not trying to sell somebody something that they don't need, but we're trying to put it in a language, in a form that people say, oh, I get it. Tell me more. And then, so as I thought about that, inevitably in conversations that I come in, especially being a male, inevitably says, well, so what do you do? Mm-hmm. What do you do for a living? That is a conversation starter that gives me an opportunity to put in words what we do as a profession and start bridging that gap so people says, oh, I didn't know you did that. Oh, really? I have somebody that might benefit from that. Well, the more I listen to therapists and I ask them that question, and with my coaching and that, I found out, oh, most therapists can't answer that very well. They talk with language, they talk too much information, and they use medical jargon, and it just overwhelms most people. It's almost ambiguous that they just can't comprehend it. So that's where I thought, oh, let's practice, let's take serious, how do we explain what we do without making a pitch for something or having a quote, an elevator speech, but some of the elements of that, how do you accurately, compassionately, effectively explain what you do?
When you put in here, you make a great point, and I like how you put this. You say in here, it's easy to back up the truck and dump out all the stuff in your brain, basically. You know, dump the truck with overload. Here's what I do. But the point of your guide here is to have a conversation in real life, using real life words, not jargon. And so to not, back the truck up and here's what I do and here's what I know, trying to overwhelm them with big words and all of your knowledge. Because at some point, really early on, people's eyes will glaze over and go, I'm out. Shark Tank, I'm out. So it's a dialogue, not a monologue. And you make a very good point here of breaking these up, what you have to say, into chunks. And so I'd like for you to speak to that.
I would say it is about a 20 to 30 second chunk of information. So if we step back, Scott, and I was thinking, well, most people are in information overload right now. We just have so much, especially commercial messages. There's just so much information that we're learning to say, I can't process that. I've got to filter that out. Mm-hmm. Especially if it sniffs of anything that they're trying to sell me something, because we just get so much of that. It's ringing on my cell phone, pops up into my email. It's just everywhere, and I'm starting to get those filters built up. So there's information overload, and at the same time, I still have these needs. Like for me personally, I have a need for a physician, and I have a medical. Well, I try to seek out someone that I can connect with personally, someone that I can trust. We put a deck on our house. Well, then I'm a consumer, and I'm seeking out someone who can meet that need. And then as I interact with them, the one that gets the bid is someone that connects with me personally. And the way his manner, it wasn't all about the money. Matter of fact, that was probably down the list. It was really that personal connection with him. And part of that is I don't want the guys that, I'm really cautious of the people that try to give me the hard sell. So, I think if we're aware of that, it's up to us to say, oh, I just really have to do the hard work of refining and prioritizing and thinking very thoughtfully about how do I put what I do in these 20, 30-second bites that people can grasp, and do it in a way that's more of a natural conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the short sound bites. So one thing that I mentioned in my video was to use some colorful language. And I'm not talking about 4-letter words here. I'm talking about thinking about how you can paint the picture of what you do as a therapist. And so, in my clinic, we provide pediatric therapy. And so just trying to keep that into a short sound bite to initiate that conversation is to paint that picture and say, Like, for example, I would say, hey, Scott, what do you do? Well, I own a therapy clinic and we provide therapy for kids. Now, it's not at that point really important for me to say OT, PT, and speech. That kind of is extra. I could eliminate that. I could just say, we identify kids who have a developmental problem. And then if they have a significant enough problem, we start doing therapy with that child and put them through some superhuman interactions and tasks to improve their skills and bring them up to speed. And that's all I would say. But that, I thought, well, that word superhuman, that's got to stir a question right there. Hopefully that person's going to be like, what are you talking about, Scott? Superhuman tasks and activities. What's this all about? Then we're having a conversation at that point. Then we can talk vestibular input. We can talk other stuff and we can unpack that. But I might only have 10 seconds with that person. And if I drop that, hey, we're going to do some superhuman activities here, their curiosity is piqued, and maybe I can put a business card in their hand and they'll come to the website or call me or whatever. But if you have a longer time for a conversation, you can unpack that. So I think it's also, you mentioned this, I think it's also important to take the time to have the conversation, because we always want to move. I'm very bad about this. I got to get to the next thing. I've got to do this over here. And I have to catch myself, especially if I'm working at the clinic. If I'm in the office, if parents come up to the window and they want to talk, I have to remember, I need to put this paperwork aside. I've got to have this conversation because this person is important. And, this is about my business and their child. So I need to have this conversation. So I think some people have a difficulty with that. It's to have that extended conversation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's all about perspective. And I think it's also, Scott, some vulnerability and honesty. I was having a conversation with a therapist that was trying to grow her practice. She was wanting to quit her full-time gig and grow this to the point where she could do that. And boy, we had about a half-hour conversation. We're thinking about, I was just trying to help her, and she was thinking, well, do I need to hire you formally, like coaching? But so as we're in this conversation, and I left that conversation, I thought, why is she hiding? What is she hiding from?
Mm-hmm.
So she told me what she did and was explaining it. It was more about like her credentials, her techniques, her knowledge. But I felt like I'm not getting to know her as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And and even on her website, there wasn't a really a very good picture of her. And I thought, what we're really called to do is to connect with people, and we will connect with them, not so much by what we do, but who we are.
Yeah.
And just like my illustration with the deck, I made a decision to purchase that service more on an emotional level than I did on, well, how much is it going to cost? And I think people make that decisions that way. And if the way we carry on conversations and the stories that we use to illustrate what we do, if that can connect with people on an emotional, personal level, it's going to do two things. It will help them remember what you said. It gives them a hook. If you're just giving them data and information and talking about the techniques and what you do as a therapist, but it's not in their world and their language, they aren't going to remember a thing that you say. And the second thing, they won't remember it. The next thing, if you tell a story like a superhuman intervention, that's shareable.
Yep.
So when they're talking to their friends and they say, well, guy told me this really cool story of what they do with these kids, and they kind of get them in this gym and they swim, they have this swing there, and they're, I don't know exactly all what it is, but it was amazing what they're doing. And it's kind of what Chip Heath talks about, being it sticky. It has a way of sticking to people. So if you can get the vision, if you take time to have those good quality conversations and you don't go on and on and on, It's short, it's memorable, it's kind of sticky, but then it's also shareable. So that
Yes.
when they are talking to their friend or they're going to talk to a patient to refer or something, what they say about you creates a picture that's, oh, I think I'll give them a call. And just like you did, the superhuman creates something that's kind of unexpected. It's kind of fresh. It's creative, rouses curiosity enough that people would take action on it. And if we can get that vision, that's the type of conversations that stick
Mm-hmm.
versus, oh, I'm going to give more information. That just gets into the static and the droning on that we're all hearing day after day after day on the radio and all these activities, just people selling us things. If you're going to stand out from that, I think what flows from me and the people that I work with is more of a genuine, human, personal, honest relationship. And people are looking for that.
Yeah.
Not everybody. Some people are looking just for easy answers, but there's a movement around where people are looking for genuine personal relationships with authority figures, with professionals that they can trust. And they say, they really care, and they seem like a human being. He was just really, really nice. Well, I think that sells in the long run, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that begins with an honest conversation.
Yeah.
And it's so vital that you have said, oh, I'm going to do the work to prepare to have good answers and good
Yes.
questions. And the
Yes.
interesting thing about that, Scott, if you can do that and you go through that process of refining, and it's hard work to say what we do in less words, in creative words, memorable words, attention getting words. That is really hard work. But if you can do that, that's the seed and the germ of the idea that you can take that and it's like a Swiss Army knife.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get that, boom, you put it on your website and it's the top of the fold, and people look at that, oh, that's boom, you take it there, put it on your brochure, boom, boom, you put it on an ad or something like that. And the other thing that happens is it forces you to identify and commit to and prioritize, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is who I do it for.
Mm-hmm.
3 really essential questions that are really hard to refine down and prioritize. So we just get it. We just don't want to do the trade-offs. We say, well, I really like to do this, but I don't want to give up this. I want to help these people, but I don't want to tell people no. And gosh, I need the money. I'm trying to get this thing going. We need more people. The tendency with that kind of muddies our message. But if you go through that process and commit to that, it really adds clarity, both to your core message, but also in your own mind. It says, this is where I'm putting my flag in. This is who I am. This is what I'm called to do. And this is who I'm called to serve.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm coming back to this guide that you created because there's some practical steps in there helping people do just that. Because people are like, well, how do I do that? How do I come up with this tagline, this explanation, this verbiage? So again, go to Paul Potter PT and click on the free stuff for that, and I'll put a link also. But I want to mention, because I had this thought earlier, just remembering back when I was a younger man, and thinking about, we're so wrapped up in our own world, and that's just how it is for most people. But as a young man, I started going back to church, and I was like, what's up with these Psalms in here in this Bible? What do we need these Psalms for? This is kind of sad. This is kind of depressing. Why do we need this? At that point, I hadn't had much struggle in my life, right? I didn't get that. But as I went back and read over the Psalms and scripture, I was like, okay, that's ringing true to me now. I'm feeling that. Once you experience some stuff, it's easier, I think, to have sympathy and mercy on other people, to have those conversations. And we are in that business of, we should be having sympathy and mercy for folks. So as you go throughout your day, even though you've not experienced that hardship that that person has, and it might not be the hardship that's physical for them right now. Sure, they might have that going on, but they might be thinking, how am I going to pay for this therapy session? I need it. I want it. Or, my granddaughter just got in big trouble at school. They're going to kick her out. That might be what's weighing on their mind right now. And it's hard for us, if we've not been in that situation, to have mercy and sympathy for them, but we need to practice that as far as stepping into their shoes, because it might be the conversation that you have about that person's granddaughter that helps them to decide to have therapy with you. We don't want to use that as a sales tactic. We're using it as a real person because we're interested in them. It reminds me of, there's a radiologist I go to church with, and it was funny the other day after church, he sat down. I was having a conversation with this other gentleman who's a flight instructor at the Air Force Base here. The doctor sits down. I know the doctor. The doctor didn't know the pilot. And he sits down, and the first thing he says to this pilot is, "Who are you and what can I learn from you?" Now, this doctor's brilliant. Probably not the best tact right there. I mean, he's a super nice guy. But what he was trying to accomplish, I knew, is that he was trying to have that conversation with that person. But he's a very giving doctor. He's got a great bedside manner. So his approach maybe was lost on the pilot, but after they got conversating, it was fine. But he was truly interested in that person, even though he didn't know him from Adam. He really wanted to know him, and he was humble enough to realize this guy's a radiologist and a very smart guy in other regards, just a real smart guy. But he was humble enough to realize this person, even though he didn't know him, had something to teach him. And he wanted to know what that guy could teach him, to take that much interest in everybody that you meet, even if it's the janitor at your kid's school, realizing that that person has something to teach you. There's a conversation right there. And that's how you get to know people. That's just life. I mean, that's how we should be as far as our interest in people. And you can't fake that.
Very, very well said, Scott. I think that empathy, to get to know people, and if we come from a good place and a generous heart, it just naturally leads that they would ask, well, who are you? And tell me more about you. And as you do that in an honest, genuine, clear way, it might overlap with a need that they might have that you can help serve them with.
Mm-hmm.
And you might not ever get to that point if you don't demonstrate compassion and mercy towards them first. Because in one sense, they're saying, well, who are you? Who are you? Do I like you? Can I trust you? And as you give your time and your attention, people will naturally kind of almost reciprocate with that. And if lo and behold, if they need your services or know somebody that needs your services, that will create an opportunity for you to be able to explain it and see if they might come to your clinic.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That's neat. Yeah, super.
All right, I'm going back.
And doesn't that sound like just hard sell marketing? But it's so refreshing. I mean, it's so different, and it does sound like us. If you come from that way, now it's difficult, and there's these pressures like, oh, I need patients. Oh, I need patients. Oh, I need a patient. Are you going to be my patient? Oh, I need patients. That's going through your mind like, oh, yeah, I got the bills to pay, and then the other part is that insecurity, I'm not very good at this. They don't, I'm nervous. They're not going to like me. They're going to reject me. But if we can kind of get the focus off ourselves and be who we are created to be and be others focused, it can flow a little easier, and then we can express ourselves, and that increases the odds that we're going to make those type of connections.
Definitely.
But it's difficult. We all sweat bullets when we're trying to talk to doctors and meet people for the first time and present what we do. But I think that's why if I spend the time to do my homework, I can get into these scripts to get over that just a little bit, to get the conversation started and see where it goes. Some don't go anywhere, but some do. And you say, oh, that person was so nice. They asked me questions. I really felt like we connected. It didn't feel like a sales call. We got past that, and all sorts of different people like that. You can do that in all different settings. So that's why I've kind of said I felt like that starting point was that kind of that conversation starter. If people can master that, I think there's some spin-off and growth that can happen in that process. Now, the thing is with a guide, and what I've noticed, people read it and they recite it in their head. And they think I kind of do that. Well, you've got to write it out and do the homework and put it into short sentences. It's really hard to say it, and then say it out loud. And then do your friends and family or somebody that you're trying to present it to, say it out loud and get some practice with those conversations. You say, oh, okay, that didn't work. I thought that's what I wanted, but that's not it at all. And actually make it more usable and practical. That's when the growth and the refinement comes.
Yes.
You got to get it out of our heads.
Well, what I wanted to suggest is you have in this guide here, it reminds me of Mad Libs. Did you ever used to do Mad Libs?
Oh, yeah.
So, so on your guide, you have a script. It's like a Mad Lib script, and you're putting the phrases in there. So that's reason enough to get this guide, to put your Mad Lib scripts in there. And then here's what I would suggest.
Why don't you read that out loud, Scott? Do you have it right there in front of you? Can you read the, it's, and I've been thinking of, well, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, and to set it up, before you get to the Mad Lib script here, you're helping them come up with.
That's the first time it's been called a Mad Lib script.
Don't mean to degrade it, but that's what it reminded me of. The Mad Libs.
I'm going to go back and change it from 5-part dialogue formula to Mad script.
The Mad PT marketing script here. But no, it's very practical, very helpful. But what you're giving them before you even get to the Mad Lib script is some ideas to think through what you're going to put in this Mad Lib script. And here's how it goes. It says, I help, quote, ideal clients. So you've got to figure out who your ideal clients are. And that's what you're putting in the Mad Lib script right there. I help ideal clients with, quote, the problem you solve. You're figuring out the problem that you solve. And again, in the guide, Paul's helping you out, figure out what the problem you solve is. So I help ideal clients with the problem you solve by, quote, what makes you different, so that, quote, ideal clients may experience, quote, results, benefits, right there. So that's kind of the Mad Libs clips, and of course the Paul's helping you figure out how to think about what to put in there. But you go ahead. You were going to say something about that.
Well, just to emphasize, when you're writing that out, it goes back to your previous point. You're starting with empathy. What's this like for this person? I'm in their shoes. What do they need to hear from me that, again, captures their attention and resonates, that I'm communicating to them, I really understand I understand the problem that you have. So what we try to think is, this is who I am and this is what I do. And the person's thinking, okay, that's who you are. I don't really deeply care about what you do, but does what you do solve the problem that I have?
Mm-hmm.
they might say, well, it gets these, you might say it gets these results, it's evidence-based, it's da, 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 it's better than the alternatives. And they're saying, well, what does it do for me? How does it make my life better? What are the benefits to me, not to you? I know. I wonder, is the only reason to have this conversation is because you're in it for the money? Or you seem a very sincere guy and you really like what you do. I'm happy for you, but I still got this problem. Does it help me? And the other part is, if you sound like everybody else and it's not unique or interesting or remarkable, they're not going to remember it. You're not going to stand out. So you say, oh, that's how people's attention is these days. And I have to think through, how does what I do different from their perspective make it worth having more of a conversation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
So that,
go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think people can sense that desperation that you're fishing for a new client. You know, like pheromones, maybe. You know, like, this guy's really trying to reel me in here.
And you might desperately need patience. But we have to hold that in check. And what you said before, our empathy has to kick in first, and trust that if I am really being honest with who I am, and this is what I really feel called to do, and I am confident that I have the knowledge and the skills to help people, if I can explain it in a clear way, I have to let go. And if it's a good fit, and if it's meant to be, it will happen. It will be a good fit. And the more I try to force that fit through my insecurities or my need, it'll tend to close that fit. The people pick up on that.
Yep. Well, and so here's the challenge that I'm going to throw out to everybody. So download this guide and then fill out the Mad Libs on it. And then I want them to shoot a short video of their Mad Libs, what they've created.
Oh, wow.
Shoot the short video there. You can share it with us if you want. We'd love to see it. But just for your own benefit, you know, here's my Mad Libs version of what I do that Paul helped me with. And shoot the video of it and watch it, because you're going to pick up on some stuff like, oh, I need to improve that, or that part was good, or I probably should smile when I say that, or maybe I shouldn't smirk when I say that. And to get that feedback, because we think we know what we look like when we deliver that message, but the perception is not the reality. And if you want to share that with us, you can email that to me or Paul, and we'll give you a little critique, and we won't judge you on it. We won't judge you on that. So that's the challenge. Videotape yourself doing the Mad Libs formula here. Paul calls it a 5-part dialogue formula. So that's what that is.
And even if they want to write it out, which is the first step, or say it out like you said, just email me. And my email is heypaul@paulpotterpt.com. And I'll give you some feedback on it. But just the act of writing it down and sending it in, it's fantastic. You know, some of the ones that people have sent in, it's like, oh, this is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is going to work. My natural question is, oh, that is so good. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Oh, what does that mean? Or, oh, that's, sounds so interesting. Well, that's what you want. You don't want to try to dump the truck right away, but if you can provoke that type of response, and how many times have we done that, that you've seen some type of message or talk to somebody and you just say, oh, really? Why is it that way? Or tell me more about that. Or that's remarkable. Mm-hmm. You do that. And I think what we do with kids and people's lives and how we care for them, if we can put that in a language and a story, most people will resonate with that. That says, oh, that is really good. That's really neat.
Yep.
Tell me more. and then you have a chance to explain just a little bit more. And that really does increase the odds that you're building a connection that if they don't need your services right now, and they might need it 6 months from now or a year from now, they're going to, oh, I had that conversation with that therapist. Or it'll twig while they're having a conversation with somebody else says, oh, I was just talking to this therapist and she had this person, da, 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 da. Oh gosh, what was her name? You know, that type of thing. You got to go see her or call her, or here's the website, that type of thing.
But I think part of your formula here also is having that very concise, well thought out explanation of what you do and the benefits for that person. But then to also, and you mentioned this earlier in the guide, is to ask questions of the person that you're conversating with. And I would even suggest that the conversation should be almost like an 80-20 split. You're the 20% of the conversation. Who you're talking to is the 80% as far as who the focus is on. And to ask, and maybe even to think through, what are some questions potentially that I can ask that may be somewhat related to therapy. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but at least a couple in your pocket would be helpful, I think. But to make sure that that 80-20 split is there and to not have the focus on you so much. I mean, get, what you have very concisely in what you're creating here, what Paul's trying to help you create, because that person is going to remember that probably even more so than if you were the 80% of the conversation, because they're going to be like, you know what? Paul was really interested in what I'm doing, basically. And it might not even be about therapy. It might be about their chickens at their house or whatever. Who knows? So keep that 80-20 in mind, I think.
Yeah, a helpful kind of illustration to make memorable is journalists are taught how to write a lead sentence. So the most important part of the article in whatever they're writing is the essential, critical elements of that story are in the lead sentence. And if they don't read anything else in that article, they'll get the gist of the most important part of the story. Because the editors, if they kind of write it like a drama and a novel and say, we're going to leave the surprise ending at the end, well, the editor might say, well, gosh, we've got to cut this down because we've got this other story to run. And the most important part of the story is cut out. Well, if you lead with that, and then you let the rest of the information flow from that, that's kind of like our conversation. That when they say, well, hey, so what do you do? That's your lead sentence.
Yep.
So if you can crystallize it there, then it flows. From that point, it's just a conversation. And if that hits a hot spot on them, it says, oh, tell me more about that. Oh, I have a child. My daughter has this child and they have these needs, and kind of where they're going, they're not happy. And can you tell me more about what you do? Well, you're serving them and loving them by giving them more information, and again, in a concise way that you don't go on and on and on, but you let the conversation flow, but that you've given them that nugget and condensed it in that lead sentence.
Yep.
And there's an art to that, of being able to condense it down so that you got the most important information in one sentence. So
very good.
Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it's good.
Yep.
Well, Paul, we're going to have to end this here in a minute, but is there anything that you want to mention that might be in your guide here, or just another thought, and then let everybody know where they can find you?
I think there's two aspects of it, Scott, as I've thought about it and just kind of pondering what are some of the obstacles. Some of it's almost an interior work where, when you graduate and you start stepping out there, you're just trying to get some experience, get your feet on the ground, help some people, not kill anybody, and make a living, start paying off some loans. And then you get 5-10 years into it and you're starting to say, this is my and I kind of use the vocation or calling as a healthcare professional. This is who I am. This is my passions. This is what I'm meant to do. And there's a little bit of interior work of just settling in that identity and being comfortable with not being somebody else. And that's hard to do. So with that, I think there's just that part of how do we integrate what we do as professionals as who we are. And as we get more in touch with who we are and let that flow into what we do, it is dynamite. So that's part of that. That's different than taking course after course after course and thinking if I know more, if I get better at this, if I look like that person, or if I imitate that, that will help me with my identity. And it won't, because you will be unique and contribute to people's lives in ways nobody else can if you are yourself and own that. The other part is, don't be afraid to interact. There's a public aspect of that, as you experiment with that and talk with people about that interior work and what you do, and refine that, you're going to get good feedback of, oh, this is what people need. And it's different than what's needed for the last 30 years of how it's being delivered now. To a certain extent, it's broken, but those people still have those needs and we can still help them. But we have to have these conversations to find out, oh, this is how I can take what I do and help serve these people and help them. But we got to kind of do it in a different way. And if you don't have those type of open conversations, we're just going to kind of keep repeating the same thing over and over and complain about, why doesn't the system change to let me do that? I just don't think that's going to happen for us. So that's that two-way street. And I would start with people that know you, trust you, love you, and can honest conversations that you say, okay, this is how I take what we do into the marketplace, into the churches, into my kids' soccer club, and have these type of conversations. The schools have these conversations, and pretty soon people say, oh, I get it. Now I know what you do, and I know somebody that needs your help. And I hope that kind of one by one, as we do that, we get more comfortable in that role as professionals of, quote, promoting or marketing our services, and not say, oh, we're going to leave that to big medicine or the marketing department. And that, they've got different goals and organizationally. So as we do that as professionals, I think that's really the way to have impact in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do. And that's the most meaningful part of interacting with people. But we got to have a chance to get them into our clinic and have a chance to help them. So if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. But I think it comes down to also practice. You know, like I said, the brain gets very good at what it does a lot of. So go out of your way just to introduce yourself or ask, strangers. I mean, don't be creepy about it, but if the timing's right, practice having a conversation. Just you're going to get better at it the more you do of it. So.
Oh, I agree. And you do it so naturally and from a good place and with humor, and not take yourself too seriously. Just almost have fun with it, and realize it's not life or death. And I think by taking those conversations, it's amazing where they can end up.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't that just has a better feel to it than marketing?
Yeah.
It is marketing and promotion, but it just has a more common sense wholeness to it that I think, and it gives it empowers therapists. Says, I can do that. I do that already.
Mm-hmm.
I just got to do it better and more often. And when we do that, our practice grows,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, where can people find you at?
I'm on the internet. Amazing thing. And that's an amazing thing too, that we can connect that way. So it's paulpotterpt.com, and I'm on LinkedIn. That's a good way to connect. And then what I found is if people says, oh, I resonate with that. I like the place where he's coming with. We seem to connect. What I've done, I do my best kind of one-on-one connecting. So I offer a free strategy call. It's a 20, 30-minute call. If somebody says, I'm at this point, I just have these questions, let's just talk about it. Let's have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And through that adds clarity for them when they get to explain to somebody that kind of understands the process. And then sometimes I say, well, this is what I would suggest is maybe the next step. So that, just go to my website and there's a strategy. It's all over there. Book, let's talk. I mean that, let's talk. And that's the best way for us to have that conversation.
Excellent. paulpotterpt.com, and you can go over to the free stuff over there and get this guide, how to have a conversation and to fill out the Mad Libs on there.
Oh, you're really putting pressure on me to change that. And I just want to say, Scott, I appreciate you and your heart and how you, just the impact you've had in people's lives and my life, and your audience and the listeners that follow you. It's just been a privilege to know you and to contribute to help them like you've helped them. So hopefully this guide and the principles of it just flow out of what you're doing for them week by week and on your website. So,
well, I appreciate you saying that. The feeling is mutual.
Appreciate your work. So,
well, very good. All right, Paul. Well, we will talk to you soon, and thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right, I always enjoy visiting with Paul Potter. I mean, when I started my podcast, I guess it's been 5 years ago, and Paul had a podcast pretty much at the same time I did. We started kind of at the same time, and we met really early because we were in that same space, and we've been good friends ever since. So I've been up there to visit him at his house, and our families have visited. Just a great guy. Really enjoy visiting with Paul Potter. He's been a great mentor for me. So be sure to get his guide over at paulpotterpt.com. And also, you can go to startedtherapypractice.com/83. That's the Client Persona podcast, and get that guide over there. This podcast that you're listening to is at startedtherapypractice.com/85. If you want to go to that page, because over on that page are links to Paul's guide and also links to connect with Paul, either an email, and he's pretty big over there on LinkedIn also. So startedtherapypractice.com/85 for this episode. Like I mentioned, if you would like to create your Mad Libs 5-part dialogue formula and share that with Paul or myself, please do so. If you could do it in video, that'd be awesome. But if you don't want to do that, you can just share the text dialogue of that 5-part dialogue formula Mad Libs conversation starter. All right, let me know if you need anything, Scott at startedtherapypractice.com. And until next time, Godspeed to you in your practice.